Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Bowman, and I am the Director of Policy and Outreach for ULI Boston, New England. I would like to welcome you to this morning's program. As you can see, we are using our Zoom meeting format again for today's programming instead of our webinar format. You can use the chat function to communicate with other members as we use this platform. Please note that there's a difference between private messaging and individual messaging. So please be sure to make sure that you are reaching out to the individuals that you want to directly. Feel free to share your video and be active participants throughout this process. And please remember to also mute yourselves. This program is being recorded and will be available in upcoming weeks through ULI. If you have questions, please type them into the chat box and our moderator will call on you and you will be able to unmute yourself to ask your question. We would like to, of course, thank our sponsor, Suffolk Construction. We could not do our dynamic programming without the support from our members. So thank you so much. So now I would like to turn it over to Jason Seberg from Suffolk Construction to give remarks and to then introduce our moderator. Thank you everyone for being a part of the program. Jason, please do take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining today's panel, Inclusive Innovation in the Life Science Development. My name is Jason Seberg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Suffolk, focused on our healthcare and life science sectors. Today's discussion is going to be focused on 585 3rd Street, which is an ambitious lab complex by BioMed Realty with 40,000 square feet of public theater and culture space in Cambridge, Kendall Square, and its impact on future life science developments and innovation clusters in and around Greater Boston and also nationally. Life science companies like BioMed are discovering breakthroughs every day that allow science to get to patients faster than ever before. And if we've learned anything over the past year, is that the focus will only intensify moving forward. It's what makes our work here at Suffolk as a building partner so meaningful because we get to be indirectly a part of these discoveries. One of our core values is find a way. As a company, we believe challenges are simply invitations to find and create and implement thoughtful solutions. This is what attracts us to the life science sector and why we are so humbled to have the privilege to be a part of projects like 585 3rd Street. I now have the distinct honor of introducing Lisa Seraphin, founding principal at Redgate, who will introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion. As a founding member of Redgate, Lisa has provided strategic real estate counsel for her clients. Her focus is on large, complex urban development projects with specific areas of expertise in development, strategy, financial feasibility, infrastructure, and government relations and approvals. Prior to co-founding Redgate, Lisa was a national director and senior vice president of development at Jones Lang LaSalle, where she was responsible for major project development. Lisa, thank you for leading today's discussion, and I'll turn things over to you.
Great, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate your sponsorship of this great panel. We're very excited to be here. This is a great project. As Jason noted, Redgate's been the project manager for this project over the past several years, working closely with this team, including Sal, the VP of Development at BioMed. And it's a very exciting project. We very much enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to sharing the details with you today. So let's get into it. We're going to first have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to give you a short presentation and then some discussion amongst the panelists, and then hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A. So let me turn it over to Sal Zino, VP of Development for BioMed, to introduce himself and his role in the project.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Sal Zino, Vice President of Development at BioMed. I am here in the Cambridge office, and I'm going to turn it over to Iram.
Thank you, Sal. Good morning, everyone. My name is Iram Farooq. I am Assistant City Manager for the Community Development Department at the City of Cambridge. And our portfolio here includes everything from urban design, zoning, and development management, all the way up to transportation planning, economic development, climate change planning, and community planning, and I think I missed one, transportation. Yes, thank you. Oh, housing. Yes, affordable housing is a big focus as well for us. So you'll see threads of all of that in what we talk about later. So I'm going to turn it over to Kishore.
Thanks, Aram. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kishore Varanasi. I'm a principal at CBT. We're a Boston-based design firm. I'm the lead design on this project.
Great, thank you, team. And Sal, you're going to provide us with a brief presentation on the project.
Yes, yeah, so we'll share that right now. So again, I'm going to thank Iram and Lisa and Kishore and Jason again. I mean, it's been, amazing working with the team so far. I'm looking forward to what's to come. And what is to come is our 585 3rd Street project. I think for those of you not familiar with the area, this project is in the heart of Kendall Square, the area known as one of the most innovative square miles on Earth. It's a 16-story, 525,000 square foot lab building with about 40,000 square feet of performing arts and public space spanning portions of levels 1 through 3. So before I get into specifics, I wanted to share a vision statement that summarizes our aspirations for the project. Everything that you're going to hear today is aimed at achieving the goals outlined in the statement. So quickly run through that. 585 3rd will be a transformative hub for communities and creatives to bring fresh diversity and culture to Kendall Square. Centered around BIPOC leadership, experience, and culture, the theater and surrounding open space will provide collaborative opportunities for the full spectrum of Cambridge's creative sector and act as a magnet for residents of all walks of life. The artistic vision for 585 3rd Street has been heavily informed by the active feedback and lived experiences of Cambridge's arts community. Through their input and that of hundreds of residents in East Cambridge and beyond, 585 3rd is poised to act as the gateway to a newly dynamic, welcoming Kendall Square, one that utilizes innovative urban planning and accessible cultural programming to reflect the rich diversity of Cambridge. I promise it'll be the last time I'll read from a slide. Just flip to the next one. Perfect, thank you, Kishore. So the site is located right off of 3rd Street and is one of the last undeveloped parcels within a larger master plan project that was conceived about 20 years ago by Ken Greenberg. BioMed owns many of the surrounding buildings, and the western portion of the site that you're looking at is currently home to a utility-owned gas transfer station, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. And next slide, please. So the project, the master plan project that is, includes a mix of uses: residential, lab, office, retail, and then 2 significant open spaces. The one toward the north is home to an ice rink, and the one to the south, a canoe and kayak rental, a farmer's market, and all sorts of other uses. So our site, the center of the development, was always contemplated to accommodate some type of arts and culture or entertainment use. And then on to the GTS. So the gas transfer station, or the GTS as I like to refer to it, is one of the last remaining remnants of Kendall's industrial past. And it's the portion of the site that's on the right. It's directly between parcel C and 3rd Street. So an impediment to sort of, bringing the community into our site. The edge of the GTS fronts on 3rd, which is a major thoroughfare both for vehicles and pedestrians. And so moving the GTS has always been a long-standing planning goal of the city, but the cost to move it and the difficulty of finding a relocation site for this type of infrastructure were the 2 elements that always made relocating the site challenging. So this is just a view from 3rd Street. It's not a great view, obviously. Flip to the next slide. So arts and the arts in crisis, we looked at it as an opportunity. I think the project we've envisioned includes a significant arts and culture component. And as some of you may know, Cambridge is experiencing an arts crisis. Over the past few years, the city's lost a number of arts institutions and cultural hubs. So this fact, plus the inherent expectation that this site hosts some sort of arts and culture component, provided an opportunity for us. Next slide. So the question that arose was, what form does the arts and culture component want to take? So our outreach to the community, which included artists, performers, cultural organizations, which spanned over 2 years actually, gave us the answer to that question. So this brings us to our proposal, which was unanimously approved by the City Council in early December, or late December, actually. The next slide, Kishore. So this is a view of the building from the ice skating rink. and we wanted it is a lab building, but we wanted it to not be a typical boxy lab building and to be more reflective of the arts use within. The next one, please. So this is a view of the building from, excuse me, an elevation, a section of the building. You could see at the bottom right in the 3 levels, which integrates the public component and then the theater at levels 2 and 3. That public open space at the base of the building actually spans all the way from 3rd Street to the back of the building to the right side at Kendall. So it's you view it as a good connection to draw people into the site from 3rd. You can also see, we've incorporated quite a bit of landscaping, not only at the base of the building, but also at the terraces above. And then next slide, please. And so this is a view of a sort of 3-story expression of the public space at the base and the performance space. You could see embedded spanning levels 2 and 3, that glass box there. I think the visibility of these elements really speaks to the focus, that they were on the project. So, and this is a view from the opposite side of the building instead of the indoor winter garden. We're envisioning this space as a type of space that could host a small concert or an indoor movie night or a winter market. We want it to be very porous with the lines between in and out blurred. So you could see that is represented with those, those large bifold doors around the perimeter. So the next one. So this is just a view from perspective of an audience member looking down to the stage across the way to 500 Kendall, or the ex-Genzyme building, as some people may know it. And the next slide, Kishore. Thank you. So as the title suggests, our DEI strategy has been a focus here. More specifically, we've developed this 4-pronged approach to help us get there. The approach focuses on input, staffing, performers, and audience. Thank you. So, and to ensure that our strategy yields the right results, we're relying on resources in our community. This is the network of individuals that have been a part of this process all along: schools, arts organizations, and other groups that could shed light on what's missing from Kendall Square's cultural ecosystem, how we can provide for what's missing in an inclusive way. And the goal here is to continue to strengthen these relationships with these groups to ensure that they have a sense of ownership over the project, and also to make sure that they're constantly monitoring our progress, ensuring that we're heading in the right direction. We're not relying on ourselves to do it, we're relying on these partners to do it. And I think another exciting element here is actually we just announced, last week an announcement was made that we partnered with Global Arts Live. And Global Arts Live is going to be the operating partner for the theater and the public space. They're fully committed to this execution and actually to having a BIPOC-led theater. So it's just a wrap up of our approach and where we landed with the public benefits, the size of the theater, no parking, no new gas connection. It's an interesting project. I think I'll leave it at this. I wanted to thank everyone for being here again, and also take a moment to thank the team again: Redgate, CBT, the Urban Labs, Ken Greenberg, Suffolk, our city councilors, city staff, the community. It's been an amazing project so far. I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to work on something like this. It's a privilege, especially to do it in Kendall Square. So I will turn it back over to Lisa. I look forward to conversation and some questions later on. Thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Sal. That's a great overview. So, you talked about that this project gained unanimous approval, and Cambridge is known from City Council, and Cambridge is known for being a place where it's a lot of input, a lot of voices. Maybe Aram, you could speak to or start the conversation about why this project was able to garner such support, why it resonated with the community, with the councilors.
Yeah, so, this part of the city is actually part of a existing planned unit development, and much of that is built out, and it's a mixed use PUD. So there's lab space and lab office and housing, as well as some significant open space that exists in the district already. But there is one of the sites that Sal spoke about that was dedicated, that was supposed to be a theater. called the Constellation Theater. And for the longest time, the city has been waiting, this is for almost 20 years, for this theater to arrive. And it was an incredibly grand vision, and it never did materialize. And the person who have the vision has essentially just finally transferred the parcel to BioMed. And so from the community's perspective, it's been this fenced off, not quite hole in the ground, but just a real dead space in Kendall Square, which is one of our most vibrant squares prior to this. So, so the challenge of trying to actually create something and have that presence of arts and culture in Kendall Square was something that's really important to from Cambridge's perspective. And as Sal mentioned, we are throughout the city experiencing this decimation of our arts and culture, which we have been so proud of over time. And as you know, it's sort of the flip side of the prosperity of a community, that as it becomes more and more desirable, people are willing to pay more and more, and affordability then becomes a crunch across the board, whether we experience that on housing side, we experience that on the commercial side as well. And certainly for arts and culture, it becomes really hard to compete with office uses. So the fact that this project figured out a way to make that arts culture component real was something that was really significant to the city council. At the same time, we have struggled for the whole time that I've been with the city of Cambridge, which is a long time, to think about 3rd Street and really create a street that we can be proud of, because it used to be part of this fairly sterile office environment. And for the last 2 decades, we've been working to activate it. And we've been successful to a great extent by inserting housing in Kendall Square, which brings life throughout the day and on weekends. We've been successful at incentivizing ground floor retail, but then that one block with the gas transfer station, which had such a significant sticker price associated with moving it, and the complexity of where would it go, it was a compounding challenge. So the fact that BioMed and Sal were able to step in and figure out an answer to that thorny solution was another big win for this project, because now it allows us the hope of having a complete street that without that missing gap tooth. And so, those few kind of very concrete components, but I would say the most significant piece of why this sailed smoothly through council is the work that BioMed did to genuinely connect with the community, and not just be at the table and say, oh, well, here, you want this, we'll create this, and just sort of, instead of just checking the boxes, it felt like they really engaged with the community, because the politics is so much influenced by the residents and voters, to be quite candid. And so the fact that BioMed really went out, spoke to the community, the residents around the area, as well as the arts community, and made those real genuine connections, listened to what people needed, and are trying to make that happen in the project, was very significant. And I would say the one last piece is around the title of today, which is the inclusivity of the project, because Cambridge, again, is really with the prosperity we also have had throughout time, throughout our history, waves of immigrants. We have residents who are in the city who are finding that they're not able to compete as jobs get harder to acquire without having a PhD or a master's degree, and as the struggle to really connect with the prosperity in Kendall Square becomes harder for public housing that's immediately abutting the square. So I think that this project, in trying to make sure that it creates a place for everyone, or at least the promise of trying to create a place for everyone, was something that was really appealing to City Council. And as time goes on, that's something that we at the city side will be, holding them accountable for.
Great. Kishore, Sal, do you have anything you want to add to Garam's thoughts around what resonated with the community?
I can jump in. I think the collective design vision also, I think, played a very important role in building that consensus, not just consensus and excitement about this project. What was put forward was a very exciting, vibrant, dynamic, welcoming, and personal to everybody as a space that is created, and a space that people can move in with the rest of the building and BioMed, not just oh, by the way, there's a big lab building, which it is, and then there is a performance arts building that is tucked underneath it in a black box somewhere. You enter through a lobby and you disappear. That is sort of the checking the box mentality that Iram talked about. And I give full credit to Sal and BioMed team to have embraced such a big vision. We really said this needs to be inverted as an equation, and it should become a building that is a part of the public realm of Kendall as well as the Canal District. And this idea of a continuously porous ground floor open space that connects 3rd Street to the Tremere Square and some of the rest of the public realm system that is open, welcoming, and inviting, and really reversing, again, the theater, exposing it as a part of the overall experience of both that space and the outside space. We talk about this 1 acre of park that we're creating essentially. So when you think of a park, you do think of inclusion. You were not thinking about a building. And within that, we are able to create 15,000 square feet of indoor, all-season public space. And the theater is a part of that experience, yet another 30,000 square feet. So all of these really played a major role. It really gave a very distinct imagination that people can latch onto beyond the wonderful program it is. And that, I think, is very, very effective in the process. People really like that idea. Of course, as Sarah mentioned, we're now moving on to making this even more real. But I think the idea that Sal and the team really, even in early stages through rezoning, were willing to put forward a grand vision. Usually, you don't do this level of design. For the most part, you do an envelope and step backs, but the team collectively really pushed a big idea here that I think resonated with a whole host of communities, including the city council.
Sal, could you speak a little bit to some of the activities that you did? We had large community meetings, group meetings. You put together some advisory groups and had some on-site activities that I think really helped people understand the vision. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, there was, more on the BioMed involvement and process side. We started out, like I said, we acquired the site in August of 2018. So we spent a lot of time having a lot of conversations, engaging with the community, both offsite and on. And to your point, some of the ways that we, kind of, I guess, dipped our toes in the water with respect to the arts and culture use was by inviting some groups from Central Square and other parts of Kendall and Cambridge to present their work in Cambridge, in Kendall. So we're still continuing that. And we've actually struck an agreement with the Dance Complex, is a group that's been in Central Square for a really long time, and we're hosting them at a space at the base of our building. So for us, it's just it's continuing to learn, to engage people, to get people comfortable with being in Kendall, realizing that it's a place for everyone, and that's not just a place for businesses. And we should also give credit to Andrea Windhausen from our team. She is our community manager. She's been instrumental in continuing to engage the community with mural competitions and free tickets to the ice skating rink and whatever it takes to get people here and comfortable and to enjoy the space. And that's it. And I think it's going to help us, tremendously when it comes time to actually opening the theater and ensuring that it's active.
Mm-hmm. And so, Sal, I think, one of the things to touch on is why you're doing this project, right? And I one of the things that resonated for me when Aram was speaking was the GTS was actually not part of the Constellation project, right? When the Constellation project was there, that activation of 3rd Street wasn't going to happen. Can you speak a little bit about sort of how you're making this project work with such a high level of community benefit, as you showed on the slide, and your thoughts around incorporating the GTS and why you chose that route.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as Iram noted, it's been a focus of the cities for a long time, and it is the front door to our site. So we've also wanted to see it go away. It took a long time, and we've been working on the relocation of the GTS for many more years than we've owned the site. So I think it was really key. I guess at this point, I couldn't imagine developing the site without the GTS. It's just such a better project. As far as getting a little bit into the specifics of how this arts and culture component works and how we're able to make it pencil. To be honest, it has a lot to do with the density of the lab building above. But we've thought a little bit further. It's not just about the capital required to deliver the arts and culture space, but it's thinking about the operational model and how it can be sustainable and affordable. And that's actually been a significant element, thinking about how to shed operational burdens and real estate tax burdens and things like that, so that this space can be sustainable and affordable for Cambridge. So it's taken a lot, but with the lab building above, that's shouldering the costs, and I think it's a pretty simple model, but we put a lot of thought into it to make sure that it works.
Mm-hmm. And this is a lab building, and Ram, I'm wondering if you can speak to the role of, and Sal too, and Kishore, I mean, all the elements of having this such a large space be devoted to lab as opposed to some of the other uses that may have been considered. I mean, lab's what makes it work, right? But on the other hand, it's sort of less dense, fewer people. But how does that fit in with Kendall?
Yeah, so I mean, Lab and Kendall Square are almost analogous at this point, right? So it's not surprising that Lab is the principal use that BioMed chose to go with. But for almost all rezonings in Kendall Square over the last more than 10 years, we have insisted on having a very significant percentage, generally approximately 40%, be residential. Because Kendall used to feel like an office precinct, and it didn't feel right as a part of the city to have something that felt like an office park. And so we've been working really hard to transform it from that office feel to something that is really a part of the fabric of the city, a mix of uses, just like everywhere else, so that it doesn't feel like an office park, but feels like a neighborhood. And that transformation to neighborhood has really, it's been a significant priority. But in this particular instance, firstly, because it was discrete, we're looking at one building. It's a large building, but it's still the scale of one building. And secondly, because trying to stuff a little bit of everything wouldn't necessarily have made sense. And I think that given the history of the site as it being allocated for arts and culture, that seems like the right match. And that's also the missing ingredient in Kendall Square at this point in time. I mean, the city is working really hard on trying to inject that in this area and also around. So, we have a city project to try to create a cultural, it's an old foundry building that we're converting into a cultural theater center, and then along with some maker space and then office. And then there's this project, and on a recent rezoning also by MIT that will include some arts and culture uses. So, it's starting to feel like over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to start to see this presence, and it will really feel much more like part of the fabric of the city. So it sort of completes the mix. And I think that was very appealing.
Kishore, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Kendall had many lives. This is depending on how you compute it, version 3.0, 4.0, you name it, right? And never been the much beloved part of the city for a long time. And I lived in Cambridge for over 20 years. And, the only reason why I went to Kendall, my kids used to go to the ice skating rink. So Canal District in itself has been a trailblazer in that sense. 20 years ago when Ken Greenberg, as Sal mentioned, created the master plan, was way ahead of its time to really create a robust public relevant set of connections, and including potential arts and culture program. There was housing in it, which is Watermark, which was built subsequently, but also it has been programmed continuously. Initially it was the ice skating rink and the kayak, always inviting people who have not been a part of the Kendall Square community. That was the whole idea. Even bringing farmers market and local retailers to the site at a time when nobody thought retail would work in Kendall. This project has always been, this part of the site has always been ahead of it. But of course, now we have Kendall Square, as Iram had pointed out, is becoming more and more holistic. We have a lot more mix of housing, people living here, people working here. This particular site in that sense fulfills what I think is, the version 2 of the ambitious Canal District plan. This is the question we asked ourselves. This project as a master plan said something very unique 20 years ago. So what do we do today? And so the conversation was less about whether this is a lab building or not, but how can this sort of once again change the conversation and bring a diversity of people to Kendall. And it in fact became the sort of a consistent theme throughout every meeting, both internally and externally. I mean, this is fascinating. We all work on a lot of projects, but how every member of the team felt that they had a mission here at every meeting. Whether it doesn't matter whether they're a lawyer or you or Sal or me as a designer, there was something beyond building a building here that everybody embraced. So that's what's exciting, and that's what makes, I think, Kendall Square unique and special. But also the lesson is, the GTS, never been realized. If in some ways, if the arts facility would have been built, GTS would stay here forever. So in these large scale endeavors, timing is everything, and in some ways, right timing. And of course, Sal, as understood as he is, has been really a great visionary and sort of in fulfilling and pushing us all towards something that is beyond the lab. And of course, it's a lab at the end of the day. Let's not hide it, but we shaped it to be something very, very unique and distinct and civic.
Sal, that was great, Kishore. And I think that is the point about the mission and thinking about the broader context. It has been driving this project from the beginning. But Sal, also likewise, you own other buildings there in the Canal District with various uses. How, on a little more micro scale, how is the uses in this building fitting in with what you're already doing in the Canal District?
Yeah, so we have, 4 of the buildings we own actually are all their lab and office. So there's over 1 million square feet of lab and office that's, just across the street from this site. Then obviously we have the 2 Watermark residential buildings to the south. So I think in general, I think it's going to be an amazing amenity. We've seen, the vibrancy that the retail use sees, and especially in the warmer months when there's outdoor seating, and a desire to hang around Kendall after work. And I think this is something that's going to cause people to want to spend more time there and potentially even come back on the weekends. I think, going back to the city's vision and thinking about the Foundry and the MIT Museum and this element, I mean, it's all you could see in a number of years, people spending time here on the weekends. So for us, it's really, it's another great amenity. It pairs well with the canoe and kayak, the ice skating rink, the retail. And I think this arts and culture component is going to round it out really nicely.
Agreed. So why don't we switch gears a little bit to implementation? And you've used the words democratizing and welcome in terms of making sure that the theater and its uses are welcome to all. How, those are all very good goals. How are you thinking about making sure that's implemented? You talked a little bit about the partnership with Global Arts Live. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. But how do you bring people who typically haven't seen Kendall as a welcoming place to see themselves and to want to be there?
So I guess there's a few levels there. And, simply the way, when I started to think about this, I thought that a lot of the questions that we were getting was, what does affordable mean? And is it affordable for me, or who is it affordable for? So, we spent a lot of time understanding the lay of the land, the type of facilities that are available, what various groups are willing to pay and what they can pay. So the way we've structured the operating model and the operating agreement with Global Arts Live is that we're going to have tiered pricing. There's going to be, starting out, I forget exactly what the numbers are, what we assumed, but right out of the gate, we're going to have it somewhere, I think, on the order of 35 nights per year where the space will be completely free. So that could be, could lend itself to hosting a high school play or a small group, or you name it. And then from there, we have a tiered structure where we have 2 nonprofit rates, we have a commercial rate, and then we have, a separate rate where we may accommodate, a local biotech for an annual meeting or something like that during the day. So that's just one on the financial side. The collaboration with Maury and, Maury's commitment and knowledge of the business was really important for us. But again, back to the commitment, he knows exactly what we wrote in the commitment letter to the city. It's really important that we stay focused on that. And Maury's 100% behind it. He is, at some point in time, he will announce a position for an executive director, and that executive director will be a BIPOC person. And so that's, right out of the gate. It's not going to be us running it. It's going to be a new executive director running a nonprofit, a condo that's separate from BioMed and the lab building.
And that seems like an important thing to do to attract new audiences, new partnerships, et cetera, even across the river into Boston, and trying to draw a little bit more into Kendall. Iram, how does the city view that, and especially in the context of the Foundry and some of the other things that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's really significant, and it's really consistent with what we are trying to do as a city. So, I mentioned the Foundry in another adjacent square in Central Square. The city has partnered with the local business improvement district to transform one of our municipal surface parking lots into a place that essentially is hosting free arts and culture sessions. I mean, that happened this is a pandemic related exercise where, we actually had excess parking with fewer people driving around, to transform a parking lot into essentially a theater and a learning space for folks, as well as farmers market. So we are, this is very, very, very consistent with trying to make sure that we are protecting arts and culture, but not making them so precious that they can only be accessed by a rarefied few, that they are for everyone. And that connection, I think what Sal described is so much on point. And that's something that's really important to the city, that we, in our focus on what the city's young people are exposed to, for example, historically everybody emphasizes the STEM pieces in people's education, in terms of helping them achieve success later on in life. And in Cambridge, we have for several years now really focused not just on STEM, but on STEAM. So pulling in the arts into that, and design thinking. And I think that the more we have places like what we're talking about here today, places like the Foundry, places like Starlight Square, and our libraries, and those are going to immerse the whole, it's going to both allow an immersion by our population, but also then allow dissemination of the connection between all of these disciplines, and then therefore recognition of the significance of them and support from the community. So it's very much, I think that this is exactly the direction that we all need to be going in, not just in Cambridge, but more broadly as well.
strikes me that city leadership is really important in this regard, because it's difficult to do this. This is such a big issue, right? Cambridge used to be a place where there was more casual art and creativity, and people have gotten priced out. There's more diversity. The economics of Cambridge have really changed over the past couple of decades, and working, as the city saying we're trying to do this everywhere, I think makes it a little, provides a foundation for developers to do it in their own developments. Kishore, you've been a resident of Cambridge. Is that what you're seeing? Oh, you're muted, Kishore.
Yeah, I've lived in and around Central Square for 20 years and has seen a lot change. I lived in Cambridgeport, and it is exciting to see that the reemergence that can happen in some ways in Canal District, not just in this building, as Sal pointed out, throughout some of the ground floors of the Canal District, but also with the full maturity of Volpe Center across the street in the full redevelopment. And I think Kendall is truly going to be a place for everybody to be. I think that is exciting. I must say though, from a this particular project standpoint, it is both equally exciting and challenging to put this super hybrid together, as I call it. And I used to say this is like Cambridge Public Library, dance complex, the Sinclair and Harvard Square, a pocket park, and you name it. And then I'm also putting a lab building on top. So this is where the cities are heading, to create this super interesting mix of demographics and people together in places, so we can truly achieve this parity. But when you actually have to make it happen, there are really interesting challenges. There are challenges technically that are easy to solve, but this idea of invitation and welcome on the ground floor, and how do we do that? We have a pretty strong framework. There's a lot of detail that needs to be sorted out, and we're very excited about that challenge.
And there is Ram, you're muted.
Thank you. And just, I did want to jump in for 1 second to say that I don't want to whitewash by any means the challenges. Just thinking back to what I said, I don't want it to seem like it's all rosy and everything is wonderful, because we are losing, Sal mentioned this in his presentation, we are losing a lot of our arts and culture organizations, and they are having a really hard time. So I don't by any means want to whitewash that. And the reason why it's so important to integrate into projects like this is to be able to support their survival as well. So that's all I wanted to say.
Sal, anything to add on this topic, or?
No, I think we covered it all pretty well.
Okay. So, one of the things I wanted to note is just the relationship between the three of you, between others on the team, myself too, as well. And just wanted to ask the group, how have you, and really Sal, we'll start with you, how is it that you have created this sort of synergy on the same page? If you could just give, there are probably people in the audience who are working on these type of projects. You could talk about sort of your philosophy about, communication and, checking in and openness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I got that. So there's a lot of elements of that. I think starting out, I think the fact that we have a lot of local team members, CBT's experience, Kishore's experience in Cambridge, everybody's so familiar with Kendall. Lisa, I know you have a ton of experience working here in Cambridge over the years, and I think that's been really helpful because people understand the needs of the city, the community, the desires. So there's no friction there. I think I've worked on some teams in the past, where you'll have maybe an architect that's from out of town, and their vision, I think, can be a little bit different and maybe not consistent with the community. So I think reflecting on how we've set up the team, I think that's been really helpful. And Ken may be in Toronto, but he was obviously the original master planner for the site. So I think it was interesting for him to be able to come back to kind of finish it off. I think, personally for myself, and also for Andre, who I mentioned earlier, our community manager, I think we both take a very hands-on approach. I mean, I think the community process has been a lot of, big meetings with PowerPoints and screens, but it's also been hundreds of, coffees, you name it, all parts of Cambridge. And I think that's something that's really helped. It's just, maintaining that level of accessibility and transparency, I think, has been really helpful to the process.
Great. So we're going to turn it over to questions in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to ask each of you if you have any last things, any sort of lessons learned or anything you'd like to share with the audience about this project and why you think it was successful, and what's the secret ingredient from your perspective? We start with Sal on that one.
Fulfilling two significant longstanding goals of the city. I mean, it was funny. I have a letter from Dennis Carlone that he drafted to the previous developer in the late 90s, encouraging him to move the GTS. So, I mean, that's over 20 years. So I think, obviously the fact that we were able to spend as long as we did, but ultimately, get this on the path to being relocated was, I think, kind of a no-brainer there. We lose track of it sometimes. I lose track of it sometimes, because I think it's going to happen. But then thinking how long it took to move that, it's easy to undermine it. And then I think obviously the arts and culture component, it was 15 years that this site sat as a gravel lot, which is crazy to think that in the middle of Kendall Square you'd have a gravel lot, but I guess it's pretty simple. Two significant needs that we were able to fulfill.
Yeah, from our perspective, increasingly projects have multiple contexts. They're no longer just your site and what's around the block as the context, and not just physical, social, environmental, that are above and beyond the immediate context are informing how projects like this need to be shaped. So that was a very important lesson here to really, again, the platform that was laid out by BioMed and Sal, to have access to those contexts and people to discover those needs, so they all feel like they're a part of this. Again, as I said, it's as exciting as it is challenging, but that's what made the project to date very exciting, and it'll continue to make it much more rich, both during the completion of the design building as well as the operations side of it.
Well, I guess I'll add a few thoughts. One, I don't know how many planners or municipal folks are on here, but I think one lesson from the city perspective is just the significance of making sure you take the time to formulate a vision for a particular part of the city. So have a plan, but then be willing to be really flexible with it, as long as you always keep that vision in mind. And I think that that's really been important lesson for us over, before my time here, people were thinking about Kendall Square not just as it used to be industrial, not just as industrial, but as part of this. How do we bring this to be a part of the fabric of the city? And that's been really our aspiration throughout, through these multiple different waves of ideas and specific plans. But our ability to be flexible within that parameters of that vision has been really significant. And then I think from just thought for the development community, I think the big lesson from this project is that development really can't be about financial bottom line anymore. It really has to be about social capital in addition to financial capital. So the social capital it takes to get the project done, but really the social capital that the project then creates for the community around should be as much a part of people's thinking. I think that the project team here has really emphasized that. My favorite statement, I think, from this from our presentation today is Kishore saying that the entire team, like every member of the team, felt that they had a mission through this project. And the mission wasn't just like make sure that we make money at the end of this. It was about transformation and supporting the community. And I think that is an important thing to walk into a place with, regardless of where that place is. But certainly in more mature cities where the city and the community are expecting something more, that's, I think, a critical ingredient for success. And then the last thought really is about collaboration, because it's like there's an idea that city planners have, but we are not the ones who are going to go out and execute and build on the site. So we have a contribution at some stage, and then and then the development team or the developer certainly having the vision and being able to connect with the vision is really critical, and having the willingness to take the time and the effort to work together. And then the design team and the execution team being able to take those ideas and really transform them into something that makes it real. And throughout all of this time, what's really important is also the political will is critical. You can't make it happen without that. So our elected officials, and most importantly, the community that's around that is going to inhabit whatever gets built. That's the people that are going to work here, the people that are going to live here, and the people who are going to study, recreate. All of that is so critical, and that collaboration, if all those individuals and all of those pieces cannot work together, then I think it's hard to reach that kind of success. So I think that those are my lessons learned from this.
Yeah, that was great. Everybody's was great. And so what I'm hearing is both from you and Sal, understanding what the vision is, what you can and can't do, and then letting the rest evolve through communication and collaboration, and just listening and trying to do, trying to respond to the extent you can, right? Instead of coming in with either a fully baked vision, either on the development or implementation plan on the developer side or on the city side, but rather what are the things that are most important, and we'll let the others evolve. So no, this has been great. We have a couple of questions. So Ben Sales has a question about gas. Can we bring Ben up?
Hi guys, awesome presentation, awesome project. I totally get the social impact of not having a gas connection, but I'm really interested about, from just an engineering and making the building work standpoint, how are you offsetting it and maintaining efficiencies and still having a cutting edge lab building for your tenants?
Yeah, so the gas connection, what we've opted to do here is rely on energy from our partners, Vicinity, who's nearby. And Vicinity has the ability to, has a plan right now that they've rolled out to achieve carbon neutrality. And I think it's, we studied the possibility of doing it with our site alone, with our building alone, and struggled. And we looked to them and realized that they have a plan, they're able to achieve it, they have more space, larger scale. So that's it. It's relying on the energy from the adjacent plant, and they're actually, beginning a pilot to begin to create steam with electric boilers. So it's offsiting it essentially.
Can I just add to that 1 second? So yeah, it's steam heat. They're using the waste heat to generate steam from their power plant, and then that is getting utilized here. But also, this is an important, we didn't talk much about the city's net zero goals, but we do have sustainability goals around reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And Cambridge has a plan to get to net zero, and all new construction is going to be net zero greenhouse gas emissions. There's a ladder starting this year for municipal buildings and going up to 2030 for lab buildings. And so ultimately, I think that is another piece where this this building and then another Alexandria building that is going to be built without gas connections are going to demonstrate how lab can work without gas connections, but utilizing more sustainable energy sources.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Peter Calkins has a question about the GTS relocation. Can we bring Peter up?
Oh yeah, thanks. This has been a great program. We've talked a lot about the need, the desire to relocate it. It clearly needs to move. I'm just curious where it went.
Yeah, so it's going to, there's a small site behind our 500 Kendall building on the Vicinity site, a little unused corner where we're going to consolidate the infrastructure and tuck it back there. So it's, it's a few hundred yards from the existing site, which makes it obviously easier to relocate.
Okay, all right. So it didn't have to go someplace else entirely. You were able to figure out how to handle it within the complex.
Yeah, well, it's the way I always think about it. It's a node. It's a node on the gas distribution network. So the further you move that node, the more complicated and expensive it becomes. So we were focused on, one of the things that made it work was finding a location that was nearby.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the question that Ben brought up about the gas and talking about the sustainability with Iram, Kishore, do you want to talk a little bit more about the green? And when I say green, I mean actual, plant life and such that was driving the design of some of the elements of the project.
Yeah, one of the ways we looked at the building is very much from the shaping of the building from a passive design perspective to be efficient from a sustainability perspective. As Sal mentioned, if you really think of a lab building, you'll end up with a box. And we were able to challenge each other to come up with a building that works for the lab, but that also is shaped to respond to its surrounding context. That's how the sort of the curvilinear shape came about, but also multiple terraces. Remember, we've been working on this for about a year and a half to two at this point. The design was done actually in 2019, pre-COVID. We already knew at the time that there is a desire to bring nature into urban projects. So not only on the ground plane, but also by stepping the building back, we created 6 terraces total on the building, and also try to bring the nature throughout with the idea that, of course, it gives green roofs and access to nature on those levels for people, but also can create some microclimate and reduce the heat gains at that levels of the building, not just at the ground level. So there is a desire to bring a lot of planting through the project at multiple levels.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question, but if maybe one more after this, if anyone has one. Jim Stickley, can he come up and has a question about life sciences?
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is a fantastic presentation. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah, I'm just curious about the types of life sciences users that you're targeting and how you shaped that profile in consideration of the compatibility with other adjacent uses.
Yeah, so I mean, I could touch a little bit on the building and the programming. It's not any different than any other building in Cambridge in terms of the type of users it can accommodate. I mean, in the end, the lab building has to work to support this whole project. So that was definitely a focus, but we don't think that there are going to be really any limits from that perspective. Kishore, I don't know if you want to get a little bit more into the details of the adjacent uses and how you've thought about that from a design perspective.
Yeah, I think, Kendall, as Iram pointed out, has worked for over a number of years not to make it just life sciences only location. And a lot of the planning that I worked on and the city worked on is to find ways in which to combine residential and life sciences together in so close proximity to each other with great amounts of densities, because that's something that the community wanted. So this is a very highly urban, dense location. I can't talk about the technicalities of this, but there are ways in which these aspects are being dealt with. Again, the shaping of the building is very important here. Not only is it doing sort of this environmental issue, the purposeful nature of the curve is actually to pull the building away from the adjacent residential buildings to create that light and air, and also present again a more slender representation towards another residential building that is relatively small on the 3rd Street. So the building has been shaped to kind of keep in mind that user experiences you're talking about, both on the residential side that is across both streets, but also inside out experience and how they would work.
Great. Well, thank you to Kishore, Sal, and Aram for having a great conversation here and sharing this with this group. And again, thank you to ULI and especially to Suffolk for hosting and sponsoring this panel. This has been great. I think any members of the team would love to chat with people more. If there are offline more questions, reach out to folks. But really appreciate your hearing us today. So thank you.